Valley Jag, some of the senior staff, and I said there must be some legislation around profiling and around brute force that represent this time, like the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act did in that time. It's not enough to remember the Voting Rights Act 50 years later if we're not dealing with what we need legislatively at this time. That's right. And I'm proud, out of Brooklyn comes a man that comes out of our general movement who understands his role, and believe me, he is performing unlike any in his generation in the U.S. Congress, who has come and announced a bill and stood with the movement to announce it. Our congressman, let us hear from Congressman Jeffries.
No justice,
no peace.
No justice,
no peace.
It's an honor and a privilege to once again be here at the House of Justice, of course, with Reverend Sharpton and Bishop Daughtry and the Garner family, Attorney Hardy, and each and every one of you foot soldiers in the movement for justice. Before I say anything further, let me, of course, just thank the Reverend, the incomparable Al Sharpton for all that he's done for this community and for the country in the pursuit of justice. We're a better place today because Al Sharpton came through and has remained committed to the pursuit of justice. You know, he's like the Michael Jordan of the social justice movement. You can't stop him, you can only hope to contain him. And so we're thankful for Reverend Sharpton. On Mother's Day weekend, it's an honor and a privilege to stand here, of course, with Wen Carr and with Esau, who are going to have to go through their first Mother's Day weekend without a son, without a father. And what it does, and a husband, what it does is it highlights that though there was a national outcry when Eric Garner was unnecessarily killed on that Staten Island street, above all else, it represented a human tragedy. 6 children lost a father, a wife lost a husband, a mother lost a son. It's a human tragedy. But I'm thankful for this family because they've decided that they're going to work hard to turn tragedy into triumph over injustice. They could have sat quiet, but they've remained steadfast in this struggle in the face of unspeakable tragedy. As Reverend Sharpton mentioned, I've got the honor and the privilege now of standing before y'all as a member of the United States Congress. I'm thankful for my mother on Mother's Day weekend, Lanita Jeffries. It's because of God, her, my parents, that I was able to go from the cradle roll department to the United States Capitol. I got to tell y'all, when I got there on January 3rd, I've been in Congress now for a little more than 2 years. When I got to Congress, I was so excited to finally have the chance to represent my community that I was tempted, Reverend Sharpton, to go down to the floor of the House of Representatives, stand in front of the microphone, and simply say, holla. But you know, Reverend Sharpton, I thought about it and I quickly came to the conclusion that if I did it, I might just hear the voice of Shirley Chisholm. Y'all know I represent part of the district that she used to represent. I figured if I did, I might just hear the voice of Shirley Chisholm calling down from heaven, saying, young man, we sent you to the Congress to stand up. So don't go down there and act up. And we're here today to stand up against injustice, wherever we may find it. That's our charge. Working in partnership with today's civil rights leaders and Reverend Sharpton and others who are doing the good work of creating the climate for us to stand up against injustice in the Congress to get something done. Now let me say that I believe that the majority of police officers here in this city and across the country are hardworking individuals who are there to protect and serve. And we honor the service and the sacrifice, particularly of fallen heroes like Ryan Moore and Detective Ramos, Detective Lou. They were heroes who did not deserve to die. But as we move forward with a conversation about justice across America, if we want to be intellectually honest, if we want to value all lives, we also have to be prepared to acknowledge that there are folks all across this country who are victims of police violence who also did not deserve to die. Police violence in Baltimore, police violence in Tulsa, police violence in North Charleston, police violence in Cleveland, police violence here at home in New York City. In fact, we got a 5-borough problem in New York City. Amadou Diallo, 42 shots for having keys in his hand in the Bronx, did not deserve to die. Omar Edwards, an off-duty police officer who was protecting and serving here in Harlem, finished his shift, did not deserve to die. Sean Bell, on the eve of his wedding day, 50 shots in Queens, did not deserve to die. Akai Gurley, a young man in the pink houses back home in Brooklyn, who Police Commissioner Bratton said was totally innocent, did not deserve to die. Eric Garner, who was killed by a police officer using an illegal chokehold, killed for all the world to see, did not deserve to die. And that's why we've determined, and I stood with Gwen Carr and with Nan a few days ago to announce the introduction of the Excessive Use of Force Prevention Act of 2015 that would make the use of a chokehold illegal under federal civil rights law. We're going to ban it here in New York City and all across the country. Because Eric Garner did not deserve to die, but his death will not be in vain. And we got 20 members of Congress who are already behind this legislation. But if we just take a step back for a moment, I won't stand before you long. If we want to be honest, we've got 3 problems that we've got to deal with. We've got a problem with the excessive use of police force. We've got a problem with a broken criminal justice system that far too often fails to hold a police officer accountable when they cross the line. And third, we got a problem with overly aggressive policing practices like stop and frisk and broken windows that have nothing to do with keeping us safe. Can I talk for a moment? And if you look at the Eric Garner case, you'll find all 3 problems right there for the world to see on full display. See, Eric Garner was targeted for selling allegedly loose cigarettes. That's an administrative violation at best. But it took 2 officers, 4 officers, 6 officers, 8 officers, and more to go after him. He was targeted because of broken windows policing. At best, it was an administrative violation. Broken windows policing gave him a death sentence. We should have a problem with that. Now we got some folks in the administration who continue to support broken windows policing. And understand, they'll say to us that, well, we got rid of stop and frisk. You didn't get rid of stop and frisk. The movement got rid of stop and frisk. It was a federal court that declared stop and frisk unconstitutional. And as a result, what you've done, based on the actions of Reverend Sharpton and activists and legislators and families and so many others who pushed that federal court to declare stop and frisk unconstitutional. What you've done is you've implemented a federal court order. That's all that's happened. You didn't act like Governor Wallace. That's what happened. But at the same time, as you preside over the dismantlement of stop and frisk, and those numbers are dramatically down, you continue to stand and support broken windows policing, which brings us an encounter resulting in the death of Eric Garner. And in this country, we've got to have a balance between effective law enforcement on the one hand and a respect for our Constitution, civil rights, and civil liberties on the other, and broken windows policing is out of balance. And that's why we're going to continue to work hard at all levels of government to do the same thing that we did with stop and frisk policing to broken windows and bury it dead in the ground, never to return again. We got a problem with overly aggressive policing tactics. Second, we have a problem with a broken criminal justice system that far too often doesn't hold police officers accountable whenever they cross the line. The officers in the Amadou Diallo case were acquitted. They weren't held accountable. The officers in the Sean Bell case were acquitted. They weren't held accountable. I can go down the list. The names are too numerous to mention, where officers are not held accountable. And here we have a situation in Staten Island, caught on videotape. Eric Garner wasn't resisting arrest. He submitted to the officer. A medical examiner concluded that his death was a homicide. And yet, before that grand jury, when a chokehold that had been outlawed by the police department administratively for more than 20 years was used, they couldn't return a single charge. That officer so far hasn't been held accountable. And if I could pause there parenthetically, the ironic thing is that the prosecutor who presided over, can I talk? Yeah. The prosecutor who presided over the miscarriage of justice has gotten a promotion. Yeah. Now this is a prosecutor who, during the case, couldn't talk publicly about what happened to Eric Garner. During the campaign, he didn't talk publicly about what happened to Eric Garner. But we're here to make it clear. You can run, but you can't hide. And when you get down to Congress on Tuesday, we're going to say to you clearly, this conversation ain't over, it's just getting started. It's not over, Mr. Donovan, it's just getting started. Welcome to the House of Representatives. You can run, but you can't hide. And then lastly, the third problem that we have, of course, is the use of excessive force all over the country. And in this case, as I mentioned, a chokehold has been banned by the police department for more than 20 years. Yet we know it was used tragically in this case. And over the last 8 to 10 years, there are more than 1,000 complaints of chokeholds being used that have been filed with the Civilian Complaint Review Board. More than 1,000 complaints. So it's clear to us that an administrative ban is not sufficient to deal with a chokehold that is an unreasonable measure. It is an unnecessary measure. It's an uncivilized measure, and we're going to make sure it's an unlawful measure in the name of Eric Garner. And that's why we've introduced this bill. Now we face obstacles, of course, as we move forward. Y'all know I'm down in Washington with some interesting folks. I mean, we're trying to move the country forward. They want to turn back the clock. Wickedness in high places. But I was pleased to be down in Selma, Alabama a few weeks ago representing my district with the president and John Lewis and Reverend Sharpton and others. And I've thought a lot about that experience. And what's interesting to me is you realize that on that day, March 7th, Bloody Sunday, where you had more than 200 foot soldiers in the civil rights movement and heroes led by John Lewis and Hosea Williams, on that Edmund Pettus Bridge, marching for justice. And then, of course, they're confronted by those Alabama state troopers. And without provocation, they were chased down like dogs. Tear gas was unleashed on them. They were battered, beaten, and bruised, left to die on the side of the road. But my mama raised me in the Cornerstone Baptist Church. And I realized that sometimes with God, a setback is just a setup for a comeback. And we know that a few weeks later, Reverend Daughtry, they were back on that bridge, and this time they made it from Selma to Montgomery. And they gave us the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And 50 years later, we were down on that bridge where Barack Obama returned as the first black president of the United States of America. He served a good God. And so I'm confident that no matter what injustice we confront, we believe in equal protection under the law. Black lives matter, white lives matter, Asian lives matter, Latino lives matter, officer lives matter, civilian lives matter, Baptist lives matter, Christian lives matter, Jewish lives matter, Muslim lives matter. We ain't resting until it's clear in the United States of America that every single life matters. No justice.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, give him a big hand. We are proud of him not only in Congress, but in the community. But as he raises this legislation, we're going to rally and we're going to make sure the pressure is put on as we do what we do in the community. Now, let me say also, I'm proud of Councilman Jumaane Williams.